You're lying in bed at 2 in the morning, completely exhausted, desperately wanting sleep, and yet your brain refuses to shut off. Instead, it's running through every mildly embarrassing thing you've ever said, replaying a minor disagreement from 3 days ago, and somehow convincing you that a slightly awkward text message you sent might have permanently damaged a friendship. This makes absolutely no logical sense given your current, actually safe circumstances. And yet, somewhere in your ancient genetic programming, a small band of early humans huddled around a fire is essentially responsible for this exact 3 in the morning spiral, because the very same mental machinery that once kept them alive against serious threats is still running inside your head today, except now it's aimed at things like unanswered texts and slightly awkward eye contact in a grocery store. So let's dig into exactly which ancient instincts are still quietly steering modern human behavior, often in ways that feel completely mismatched against the actual world we currently live in. Let's start with something almost everyone experiences regularly without ever really questioning why: the instinct toward constant social comparison. Modern life bombards us with other people's highlight reels, curated photos, career updates, relationship milestones, and it's difficult not to feel some subtle pang of inadequacy scrolling through it all. This reaction feels distinctly modern, tied directly toward social media and digital culture. However, the underlying mechanism driving this comparison instinct traces back considerably further towards small ancient communities where social standing determined survival outcomes in very direct, tangible ways. In small ancient bands, typically numbering somewhere between 20 and 150 individuals, everyone's relative status within the group carried real, immediate consequences. Higher social standing often meant better access toward food, more reliable protection, stronger alliance networks, and improved reproductive opportunities. Constantly monitoring where you stood compared toward other group members wasn't vanity or insecurity. It was important survival information, since falling too far behind socially could mean reduced access toward crucial resources during difficult periods. Ancient humans who paid close attention toward social hierarchy and comparative standing likely had meaningfully better survival outcomes compared toward those who remained oblivious toward their relative position within the group. The problem is that this instinct developed specifically calibrated towards small, face-to-face communities where you could realistically compare yourself against maybe 150 people at most, all of whom you actually knew personally. Modern humans, by dramatic contrast, find themselves constantly comparing their entire lives against millions of curated online personas, essentially running ancient comparison software against an input scale it was never designed toward handle. It's roughly equivalent toward trying to run modern video game graphics on a computer built decades before anyone imagined needing that kind of processing power. The instinct itself isn't broken. It's just facing an absolutely absurd mismatch between its original evolutionary context and its current operating environment. Now, let's talk about something almost universally frustrating: the instinct toward craving high-calorie, sugary, and fatty foods, even when we're already well past the point of physical hunger. This particular craving makes complete evolutionary sense once you understand the ancient context that shaped it. For most of human history, calorie-dense food was scarce and unpredictable. A ripe fruit loaded with natural sugar, or a fatty piece of meat from a successful hunt, represented valuable nutritional opportunity that might not come around again for days or even weeks. Ancient humans who strongly craved and eagerly consumed these calorie-dense foods whenever available had meaningfully better odds of survival during inevitable future periods of scarcity, since their bodies could store additional fat reserves as a buffer against upcoming hardship. This instinct made perfect sense within an ancient food environment defined by scarcity and unpredictability. Modern food environments, though, look almost nothing like that ancient context. Sugary, fatty, calorie-dense food isn't rare or unpredictable anymore. It's available constantly, cheaply, and in nearly unlimited quantity, specifically engineered by food companies toward trigger exactly those same ancient cravings as intensely and frequently as possible. Your brain still operates according toward the assumption that this particular donut might be your last reliable calorie source for weeks, even though there's an entire grocery store and probably a vending machine within easy walking distance. This mismatch between ancient scarcity-calibrated craving and modern abundance represents one of the more physically consequential examples of ancient instinct struggling badly against contemporary reality. Let's shift toward something considerably more psychologically uncomfortable. The instinct toward negativity bias, meaning our tendency toward giving considerably more mental weight and attention toward negative information compared toward equally significant positive information. Notice how a single harsh criticism can completely overshadow 10 compliments, or how one minor mistake at work can dominate your thoughts far more persistently than an entire day of solid, competent performance. This lopsided mental weighting isn't some unfortunate personality flaw or lack of proper positive thinking. It's a deeply ingrained ancient survival mechanism that once served an absolutely crucial protective function. For ancient humans, failing toward notice a threat, a predator lurking nearby, spoiled food, a dangerous environmental hazard carried potentially fatal consequences. Failing toward notice something positive, meanwhile, rarely carried comparable immediate danger. This created lopsided evolutionary pressure favoring brains that paid disproportionate attention toward negative or dangerous information compared toward neutral or positive information, since the cost of missing a threat vastly outweighed the cost of underappreciating something pleasant or beneficial. Ancient humans whose brains prioritized threat detection above almost everything else consistently survived at meaningfully higher rates compared toward more relaxed, threat-blind individuals. The struggle emerges because modern life, for most people reading this, involves considerably fewer actual life-threatening dangers requiring this kind of hypervigilant threat detection. Yet our brains still operate according toward that same ancient threat prioritization framework, meaning we end up applying serious threat detection intensity toward things like slightly critical feedback, mildly awkward social interactions, or minor professional setbacks that carry essentially zero actual survival consequence. This mismatch helps explain why seemingly minor negative events can feel disproportionately devastating, since we're running ancient predator detection software against modern inputs that simply don't warrant anywhere near that same intensity of psychological response. Now here's an instinct worth exploring that connects directly toward something we've discussed extensively in previous explorations: the deeply ingrained drive toward forming and maintaining tight social bonds, sometimes creating discomfort or anxiety during periods of social isolation, even when that isolation poses zero actual physical danger. Ancient human survival depended almost entirely upon reliable group membership and strong social connection, meaning isolation from the group historically represented a serious survival threat, since isolated individuals faced dramatically increased vulnerability toward predators, resource scarcity, and various other dangers that group membership helped mitigate considerably. This explains why modern humans often experience psychological distress during periods of social isolation or loneliness, even when that isolation carries absolutely no realistic physical danger whatsoever. Working from home, living alone, or simply going through a socially quiet stretch can trigger anxiety and discomfort that feels disproportionate compared toward the actual, tangible risk involved. Your ancient brain isn't distinguishing between modern voluntary solitude and dangerous ancient isolation from your survival group. It's simply registering separation from social connection and triggering exactly the same alarm response that once helped keep isolated ancient humans alert toward serious danger. Let's talk about something particularly relevant toward modern digital life: the instinct toward constantly scanning our environment for new information, sometimes called novelty-seeking behavior. Ancient humans who paid close attention toward environmental changes, a new food source discovered nearby, unusual animal behavior suggesting approaching danger, subtle changes in weather patterns, consistently gathered valuable survival information through this constant scanning behavior. This instinct toward noticing and investigating novelty served important adaptive purpose within ancient environments where staying alert toward change could mean the difference between successful adaptation and potentially fatal ignorance regarding shifting circumstances. Modern technology, unfortunately, has learned toward exploit this exact instinct with remarkable precision. Notification sounds, red badge icons, endless scrolling feeds specifically engineered toward constantly promise potential new information just one more swipe away, all directly target this ancient novelty-seeking mechanism. Your brain, still operating according toward ancient environmental scanning logic, struggles toward resist checking that notification, since ancient programming insists this could represent important new information requiring immediate attention. Except instead of spotting approaching predators or discovering valuable food sources, you're mostly discovering that someone liked your photo or that a minor news story broke 20 minutes ago. The instinct remains intact and functioning exactly as ancient evolution designed it. It's simply being triggered constantly by inputs that carry nowhere near the survival significance ancient environmental novelty once represented. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Now let's examine something worth appreciating regarding risk assessment specifically. Since ancient humans developed sophisticated instinctive frameworks for evaluating danger that occasionally clash badly against modern statistical reality. Ancient risk assessment prioritized vivid, immediate, dramatic threats, a lunging predator, a falling rock, aggressive intergroup conflict, since these represented the primary dangers ancient humans regularly encountered. This instinctive framework made excellent evolutionary sense within that specific ancient context, where dramatic, immediate physical danger represented the overwhelming majority of realistic survival threats. Modern humans, however, face a completely different risk landscape, one dominated far more by slow-developing, statistically significant but viscerally undramatic dangers, poor long-term dietary habits, insufficient physical activity, chronic stress accumulation, or gradual financial mismanagement, none of which trigger anywhere near the same instinctive alarm response that a lunging predator would have triggered within ancient humans. This mismatch helps explain why people often feel more frightened by dramatic but statistically rare events, plane crashes, shark attacks, violent crime portrayed extensively in media, compared toward considerably more statistically dangerous but visually undramatic risks like sedentary lifestyle habits or chronic unmanaged stress. Our ancient threat detection system remains calibrated toward dramatic, immediate danger, even though modern life's risks increasingly involve slow, undramatic, statistically significant threats that this ancient system simply isn't well equipped toward properly recognize or appropriately prioritize. Let's shift towards something worth exploring regarding hoarding and resource accumulation instinct, since this particular ancient behavioral pattern manifests in interesting, sometimes problematic ways within modern context. Ancient humans faced unpredictable resource availability, meaning strong instinctive drives toward accumulating and carefully guarding available resources whenever possible provided survival advantage during inevitable future periods of scarcity. This instinct toward acquiring and holding on to resources, food, useful materials, valuable tools, made excellent evolutionary sense within a world where tomorrow's resource availability remained uncertain. Modern humans still carry this exact instinctive drive, even though most people reading this live within contexts of far greater resource stability and predictability compared toward ancient circumstances. This helps explain everything from difficulty decluttering unnecessary possessions toward anxiety surrounding financial spending, even when actual financial security remains solid. Your ancient brain still operates according toward scarcity-based assumptions, meaning even objectively secure modern resource availability sometimes fails toward fully calm, that deeply ingrained ancient accumulation instinct, since the underlying programming assumes tomorrow's availability remains uncertain regardless of today's actual circumstances. Now here's something worth exploring regarding physical activity. Avoidance specifically, since this represents an interesting instinctive mismatch worth appreciating properly. Ancient humans expended enormous physical energy simply surviving day-to-day life, hunting, gathering, constructing shelter, processing food, meaning evolutionary pressure favored energy conservation instincts during any available downtime, since unnecessary additional physical exertion beyond what survival required represented wasted, potentially valuable energy reserves. This energy conservation instinct made excellent sense within an ancient context defined by constant, unavoidable physical demand. Modern life, however, has largely eliminated most physical activity requirements for basic daily survival, meaning that same ancient energy conservation instinct now frequently manifests as resistance toward voluntary exercise. Even though modern humans generally benefit enormously from regular physical activity precisely because daily life no longer provides sufficient natural movement, your ancient brain still operates according toward the assumption that unnecessary physical exertion represents wasteful energy expenditure, even though modern sedentary lifestyle circumstances mean that assumption now works directly against physical health and well-being rather than supporting it the way it once reliably did within ancient survival contexts. Let's talk about something fascinating regarding pattern recognition and superstitious thinking. Since ancient humans developed powerful instinctive drives toward identifying patterns and connections within their environment, a valuable survival tool that occasionally misfires in interesting ways even today. Ancient humans who successfully identified patterns, specific plants consistently causing illness, particular locations consistently associated with predator danger, certain weather patterns reliably preceding storms, gained valuable predictive survival advantage compared toward those less skilled at pattern recognition. However, this same pattern recognition instinct occasionally produces false positives, identifying apparent patterns or connections that don't actually reflect underlying cause and effect relationships. This helps explain persistent modern superstitious thinking, lucky charms, ritualistic pre-game routines, or hesitancy regarding numbers or situations culturally associated with bad luck, even among people who intellectually understand these connections, lack scientific basis. Ancient evolutionary logic favored erring toward seeing too many patterns rather than too few, since falsely believing in a non-existent pattern typically carried minimal cost, while failing toward recognize an important real pattern could prove fatal. This asymmetric evolutionary pressure explains why human brains remain prone toward pattern recognition overreach even within contemporary contexts where this tendency occasionally produces irrational superstitious belief. Now let's examine something worth appreciating regarding tribalism and in-group loyalty instinct, since this particular ancient behavioral pattern carries significant modern implications worth exploring carefully. Ancient human survival depended heavily upon strong loyalty toward one's immediate group, combined with appropriate wariness regarding unfamiliar outside groups who potentially represented competitive or violent threat. This instinctive framework made considerable evolutionary sense within ancient contexts where unfamiliar groups sometimes represented serious danger regarding resource competition or territorial conflict. Modern humans still carry this exact instinctive tribal framework, even though contemporary social context looks dramatically different compared toward ancient circumstances. This helps explain persistent modern tendencies towards strong in-group loyalty and occasionally excessive suspicion or hostility regarding perceived outgroups, whether that manifests through political polarization, sports team rivalry, or various other modern group identity contexts that carry nowhere near the survival stakes that ancient intergroup dynamics once represented. Your ancient brain still applies intense tribal loyalty and suspicion instincts toward modern group distinctions that, while sometimes carrying social or political significance, rarely carry anywhere near the direct survival stakes that once justified this instinctive framework's original evolutionary development. Let's touch on something worth exploring regarding immediate gratification instinct specifically, since ancient humans developed strong preference toward immediate reward compared toward delayed benefit. A pattern that made excellent evolutionary sense within ancient contexts, defined by uncertainty regarding whether delayed future reward would actually materialize as promised. An ancient human choosing between guaranteed food available right now compared toward a theoretically larger food reward available at some uncertain future point faced rational calculation favoring immediate certainty, since ancient life carried constant risk that circumstances might change dramatically before any delayed reward actually arrived. Modern life, though, frequently rewards delayed gratification considerably more reliably, whether through long-term financial saving, educational investment, or health-related lifestyle choices that only produce meaningful benefit across extended time frames. Yet that same ancient immediate gratification instinct continues operating powerfully within modern human psychology, helping explain persistent difficulty many people experience regarding long-term planning, financial saving, or maintaining consistent healthy habits despite fully understanding the clear, rational long-term benefit involved. Your ancient brain still somewhat distrusts delayed reward, even within contemporary contexts offering considerably more reliability regarding whether that delayed benefit will materialize compared toward ancient circumstances where uncertainty justified strong immediate reward preference. Now, here's something worth pondering regarding how all of these various instinctive mismatches connect together within broader modern human experience. Each individual instinct we've explored throughout this discussion developed through sound evolutionary logic within its original ancient context: social comparison for maintaining group standing, calorie craving for surviving scarcity, negativity, bias for detecting threat, social bonding, drive for maintaining protective group membership, novelty seeking for identifying valuable environmental change, dramatic risk prioritization for avoiding immediate physical danger, resource accumulation for surviving unpredictable scarcity, energy conservation for managing demanding physical survival requirements, pattern recognition for identifying valuable environmental information, tribal loyalty for maintaining protective group cohesion, and immediate gratification preference for managing ancient uncertainty regarding delayed reward reliability. None of these instincts represent evolutionary mistakes or design flaws. Every single one developed through sound, sensible adaptive logic that provided real, measurable survival advantage within ancient human evolutionary context. The struggle emerges specifically because modern human environment has changed so dramatically, so rapidly, compared toward the pace at which biological evolution actually operates, that these deeply ingrained ancient instincts simply haven't had sufficient time toward meaningfully recalibrate toward contemporary circumstances. We're essentially running remarkably sophisticated ancient survival software on hardware that technically still works fine, except the actual operating environment has transformed so completely that much of that ancient programming now produces results poorly matched toward modern needs and circumstances. Let's consider something worth appreciating regarding just how recent this environmental transformation is when measured against the full scope of human evolutionary history. Ancient humans spent the overwhelming majority of our species' existence living within small, tightly bonded groups facing physical survival challenges, hunting, gathering, avoiding predators, managing unpredictable resource availability. Modern, technologically advanced human civilization, by comparison, represents an almost impossibly brief evolutionary blink, a few thousand years at most, and arguably only the past century or two regarding truly dramatic technological and social transformation. Biological evolution, operating across timescales measured in tens of thousands of years, simply hasn't had remotely sufficient time toward meaningfully adjust ancient instinctive programming toward match this remarkably rapid, recent transformation in actual living circumstances. This mismatch explains significant modern experience worth taking seriously, rather than simply dismissing as personal weakness or lack of discipline. Struggling against constant social comparison, resisting powerful food cravings, managing disproportionate anxiety regarding minor setbacks, feeling discomfort during voluntary solitude, struggling toward resist constant digital notification checking, feeling disproportionate fear regarding dramatic but statistically rare danger, experiencing difficulty decluttering unnecessary possessions, resisting voluntary exercise despite understanding its benefit, noticing persistent superstitious thinking despite intellectual skepticism, experiencing strong tribal loyalty and suspicion regarding modern group distinctions, and struggling toward prioritize long-term benefit over immediate reward. None of these represent personal failing or inadequate willpower. They represent ancient, deeply ingrained evolutionary programming encountering a modern environment that has transformed far too rapidly for biological evolution toward meaningfully keep pace. Let's wrap up by considering something worth appreciating regarding what this entire exploration ultimately reveals about modern human psychological experience more broadly. Understanding that these various struggles trace back towards sound ancient evolutionary logic, rather than representing simple personal weakness or inadequate self control, offers valuable perspective worth internalizing properly. Your brain isn't broken or defective when it struggles against constant digital notification, craves calorie dense food despite nutritional abundance, or feels disproportionate anxiety regarding minor social setbacks. It's simply running remarkably sophisticated ancient survival programming that once provided crucial adaptive advantage, now facing an operating environment that has transformed far more rapidly than biological evolution could ever realistically accommodate.